For the first time ever, Grok just beat GPT 5.5 at real coding work. Not a lab test, actual bug-fixing tasks pulled from real software. If you use AI to write or fix code, this result changes which one is actually worth paying for. It's not a clean win, though. Ask it to build something bigger from scratch, and GPT 5.5 still pulls ahead by a wide margin. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly what Grok actually got better at, where GPT 5.5 still wins, and what this really costs you every single month. Let's start with what actually happened, because the headline undersells it. Grok 4.5 beat GPT 5.5 by 6.1 points on a benchmark called SWE-bench Pro. This is the first time a model outside of Anthropic has ever pulled ahead of GPT 5.5 by this much on a test this close to real work. What does that test actually measure? Picture a popular shopping app where the Add to Cart button randomly stops working, but only on certain phones. Somewhere in thousands of lines of existing code, there's one broken piece causing it. A real developer has to read the bug report, dig through the entire code base, find the exact problem, and fix it without breaking anything else. That's basically what SWE-bench Pro tests. Real bug reports pulled from real open-source software across 1,865 separate tasks and 41 different code projects. Not a puzzle written for a lab, but the unglamorous everyday work most professional developers actually spend their time doing, hunting down what's broken and fixing it without making things worse. And on that specific kind of task, Grok is now ahead. Why does that sting for OpenAI specifically? GPT 5.5 has held the title of Best Non-Anthropic Coding Model since April. Every challenger before this one, other Grok versions, open-source models, smaller labs, tried to close that gap and failed. Grok is the first to actually do it, and by a margin big enough to notice. None of this happened by accident. Grok 4.5 was trained specifically for coding and engineering work, alongside Cursor, one of the most widely used AI coding editors on the planet, after SpaceX acquired Cursor earlier this year in a massive deal. XAI has been openly telling staff internally that the goal is to match rival AI companies feature for feature. This benchmark result is the first real evidence that strategy is paying off, at least in this one category. The rest of the field still matters, though. Anthropic's models sit ahead of both Grok and GPT 5.5 on most independent intelligence rankings overall, and this one win doesn't change that. Google's Gemini remains the strongest option for anyone who needs a massive amount of context loaded into one prompt at once, something neither Grok nor GPT 5.5 currently matches. Let's zoom out for a second and look at where all four major labs actually stand, because each one is playing a genuinely different game. OpenAI, with GPT 5.5, is betting on being the best general-purpose assistant available anywhere. Not the cheapest, not the most specialized, but the safest, most well-rounded choice for almost any task you throw at it. Losing ground on one coding benchmark stings without being catastrophic, because GPT 5.5 was never trying to win every narrow category. It's trying to be the reliable default everyone reaches for first. Anthropic, with Claude and its Opus line, is playing the reasoning and safety game. Independent rankings consistently put Anthropic's best models at or near the top of overall intelligence scores. Enterprises trusting in AI with sensitive or high-stakes work still tend to default to Claude first, and that reputation didn't come from one benchmark. It came from years of consistently prioritizing careful, safe outputs over flashy demos. Google's Gemini is playing a different game entirely, built around integration and memory. With a context window that dwarfs its competitors, Gemini is the obvious pick the moment your task involves feeding in massive amounts of information at once. An entire code base, a stack of documents, hours of transcripts, something that can actually reason across all of it, not just skim it. And XAI, with Grok, is now unmistakably playing the price and speed game. Fast responses, aggressive pricing, and a clear willingness to undercut everyone else on cost, even if it means sitting a few spots lower on the overall intelligence leaderboard. Based on everything we've covered, that looks like a deliberate strategy, not a weakness. But before you switch everything over to Grok, there's a part of this story most headlines are skipping. On a harder test, the result flips completely. Another benchmark, called DeepSWE, has a harder version, 1.1, that asks for something completely different. Instead of fixing one broken piece in existing code, it asks the AI to build something much bigger, mostly from scratch, with barely any instructions. It also uses roughly 5.5 times more code than the easier version of the same test. Picture the difference this way. SWE-bench Pro is like asking a repair technician to fix one broken part in a car that's already built. DeepSWE 1.1 is like handing someone a one-paragraph description and asking them to design and build the entire car themselves. The engine, the frame, the wiring. With almost no other guidance, and get it right on the first try. That second job asks for something different. It's not about finding one mistake. It's about planning dozens of decisions that all depend on each other over a long stretch with nobody checking in along the way. And on that test, GPT 5.5 doesn't just win. It wins by 14 points, a genuinely meaningful gap, not a rounding error. Picture the actual stakes for a second. A startup asks an AI to build its entire booking system from a single page of notes. Get it right, and the founder saves weeks of engineering time. Get it wrong, and someone has to comb through a tangled new codebase to figure out what the AI actually did, which can take longer than building it by hand in the first place. That's what's riding on a 14-point gap like this one. The 5.5 times more code detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Every additional file an AI creates is another place a small mistake can hide. A model that's slightly less careful over a long, complex build doesn't just make one visible error. It can quietly make a dozen small ones that don't show up until someone actually tries to use the finished product. So the honest picture, so far Grok is now stronger at fixing what's broken. GPT 5.5 is still stronger at building something big and new with minimal hand-holding. Neither one is simply better. They're better at different jobs. One more test settles a third question completely. Terminal bench. It measures how well an AI operates directly through typed commands, the way IT professionals manage servers, with no visual interface, just text in and text out. The two models are basically tied here. 83.3% for Grok against 83.4% for GPT 5.5. On this one skill, it's a coin flip. Now the number that actually matters most if you're paying for either of these yourself, the price. Grok 4.5 completes a typical coding task for about $2.49. GPT 5.5 costs about $5.07 for the same kind of task. Fable 5, running through Claude code, costs $11.80 for that same task. Picture two different people running these numbers. First, a solo freelance developer juggling 3 or 4 client projects, running maybe 10 of these tasks a day. On Grok, that's about $25 a day. On GPT 5.5, about $50 a day, over a month, roughly $750 versus $1,500. For someone paying that out of their own income, the gap could be the price of a laptop upgrade, a month of health insurance, or the difference between a good month and a stressful one. Now picture a small startup, maybe 8 engineers, running 50 of these tasks a day, fixing bugs and shipping small features. On Grok, roughly $125 a day. On GPT 5.5, roughly $250. On Fable 5, closer to $590. Stretch that across a month and Grok lands around $37,750 against nearly $18,000 on the priciest option for the exact same amount of daily work. That's the gap between a manageable software bill and one a founder has to think twice about every single month. One honest detail before you decide anything based on this: Grok's benchmark scores came directly from XAI itself. GPT 5.5 scores have been independently checked by outside researchers, not just reported by OpenAI. That doesn't make Grok's numbers wrong. It means one side of this comparison has been double-checked by someone with nothing to gain, and the other hasn't, at least not yet. Something did help settle that doubt a little, though. A separate research group called Snorkel AI ran its own independent test, completely outside XAI's reporting, using close to 2,000 real professional work tasks, writing business documents, building spreadsheets, preparing presentations. Not coding specifically, but real workplace tasks judged against expert-created rubrics. Grok 4.5 scored a 29% pass rate. GPT 5.5 scored 22%. Claude Opus 4.8 scored 21%. Snorkel has no relationship with XAI and nothing to gain from Grok looking good. When an outside group runs its own test on a completely different kind of task, and Grok still comes out ahead, that carries real weight. It's not just a number a company chose to publish about itself. There's a broader ranking too. Artificial Analysis, an independent group that tracks AI models across dozens of tasks and combines results into one overall score, currently places Grok 4.5 fourth overall, behind Anthropic's newest model, GPT-5.5, and Claude Opus 4.8. But Grok gained 16 full points compared to its own previous version, one of the biggest single jumps any model has made recently. And on that same index, a single task through Grok costs about 31 cents, roughly 5 times cheaper than the priciest version of Claude Sonnet, which scores lower on that same ranking. Grok 4.5 isn't the smartest model on the planet, and it's fine to just say that plainly. But it's climbing fast. It's independently confirmed as a serious coding contender now, and it's doing that at a fraction of the price of anything ranked above it. Grok 4.5 is also available now through several channels already: Grok Build, the cursor editor itself, and the XAI console directly. There are even working plugins for Word, PowerPoint, and Excel already live. That matters because a strong benchmark score means very little if regular people can't actually get their hands on the model. This one is already shipping, not just announced. One limitation worth flagging: Grok 4.5 isn't available in the European Union yet. XAI has said they're targeting a mid-July launch there, so if you're in the EU, this comparison is still mostly theoretical for you at the moment. If you're not a developer, this still affects you more than it might seem. Almost every app and website you use daily gets built and maintained by teams running exactly these kinds of tools. When a coding AI gets 4 times cheaper for routine bug fixes, that savings doesn't just vanish into some corporate budget. Products get fixed faster. Smaller startups can build things that used to need a much bigger team. The software you already rely on gets a real chance at becoming more reliable sooner. Zoom out even further, and there's a bigger pattern at play. Grok's entire pricing strategy resembles what Chinese AI companies like DeepSWE and Zippo have been running for the past year. Get close enough on performance, then win the argument on price. It's not about being the smartest model in the room anymore. It's about being smart enough for dramatically less money. If that keeps working for Grok the way it's worked for those companies, expect OpenAI and Anthropic to feel real pressure to cut prices, not just chase higher scores. This kind of price competition has a real effect on the whole market, even for companies not directly involved. When one serious lab proves that good enough plus cheap can win real customers, every other lab has to decide whether to match that price or defend a premium price with a clear quality gap. History suggests that gap usually shrinks over time, not the other way around. A year from now, the entire pricing structure across every major AI company could look very different because of exactly this kind of pressure. Before the verdict, it's fair to address the obvious skepticism. Benchmarks like these get criticized constantly and often for good reason. A model can be trained in ways that happen to line up neatly with how a specific test gets graded. That advantage doesn't always carry over into messier, real-world projects that look nothing like the benchmark itself. That limitation applies to every number in this video, not just the ones favoring Grok. These scores don't prove a permanent winner. They point at a real trend worth testing yourself before making any big switch. With that in mind, if your daily work is mostly fixing bugs, patching existing code, and keeping something already built running smoothly, Grok is now the stronger and dramatically cheaper choice. If you're building something big from nothing with a lot riding on getting the architecture right the first time, GPT-5.5 still earns its higher price. And if your work lives mostly inside a command line, it genuinely doesn't matter which one you pick. This isn't really a story about one AI beating another. It's a story about the AI race splitting into specialties, one model getting cheaper and better at maintenance work, another staying ahead on ambitious builds from scratch. A few signs would tell us whether this shift is real or temporary. If Grok keeps closing the gap on DeepSWE 1.1 over its next couple of updates, that points to a genuine trend, not a one-time result. If independent researchers, not just XAI, confirm similar numbers on their own tests, that removes the vendor-reported doubt we talked about earlier. And if OpenAI responds by cutting GPT 5.5's price, not just improving its score, that shows they're taking the cost pressure seriously. Watch those 3 things over the next few months, and you'll know whether this was a fluke or the start of something real. How the people actually building software react matters too, not just how the numbers look on paper. Developer communities move fast when a cheaper tool becomes genuinely competitive. If Grok's coding results hold up in daily use, expect engineering teams to quietly run their own side-by-side tests over the coming weeks. They'll compare real output on their own actual code bases, not benchmark tasks written by researchers. That kind of organic testing tends to be a faster, more honest signal than any single benchmark release, since it's driven by people with their own money and deadlines on the line. And remember how fast this ranking could shift again. GPT 5.6 is already rumored to be in testing. Anthropic and Google are both expected to ship updates in the same general window. Whatever's true today about who leads on which task could look completely different within weeks. That's not a reason to dismiss this result. It's a reason to treat any single benchmark win from any company as a snapshot in a race that never actually stops. So, did Grok actually beat GPT 5.5? Yes, on the exact kind of work most developers do every day and at a fraction of the cost. Did GPT 5.5 get dethroned? No. Handed a bigger, harder job, and it still pulls ahead by a wide margin. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this: stop asking which AI is simply the best. That question doesn't really have one answer anymore, and it probably never will again. The real skill now is knowing which model fits which job. It also means knowing enough about the actual costs and trade-offs to make that call yourself, instead of trusting whichever headline shows up in your feed that week. If this helped you figure out which one is actually worth your money, subscribe for more breakdowns like this. And tell me in the comments, are you switching based on price or sticking with whichever model wins the harder benchmark?